Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, we're going to get started right away. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, and to encourage holding fast to the book of God and the way of his messenger, and to call unto guidance and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. So, inshallah, today we're going to continue in Surah Al-Nazi'at. And the first thing we're going to do is review what the assignment was from the previous week, inshallah. And we were going to work on character, in cultivating character. Alhamdulillah, we had one of our dependable and reliable students and TAs. I would say this is the TA for this class, mashallah, tabarakallah, our dear sister Sobia, who just posted the homework for everyone. And she says, Assalamu alaikum, the homework is in cultivating character, the essence of good character is do not get angry nor anger one another. Don't be miserly. Don't harbor rancor. Make dua and forgive the person. Remember, in God is all success. Pick one of these three qualities and think of ways to improve. Start with the trigger points. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Very, very comprehensive. But yeah, we were supposed to work on an aspect of our character this week that we wanted to do better in, that either dealt with anger or dealt with miserliness or dealt with harboring some kind of malice or rancor towards someone else. And would anyone like to share reflections on this week's assignment? And again, you can send it to me anonymously and I can share it. I can read it for everyone, or, however you feel most comfortable, inshallah. I apologize, this blurry background is distracting to me, so I'm going to make it a regular background. Just a second. There we go. Nice. Alhamdulillah. Now I'm not floating in the middle of the screen. So identifying the trigger was key for one of our attendees, and they said most of the time the trigger was people or things that they felt out of control over, and recognizing this helped them to control their reaction. Yeah, mashallah. That was one of the points that was shared was when it comes to anger, something that helps to control anger is just recognizing that we don't own or control anyone else. Allah controls and owns everything. And so once we realize that, then we can focus our attention on what we do have access to, which is ourselves, and seeking to control ourselves rather than others, controlling our reactions especially. So, mashallah, I was going to say, I noticed this as well with myself, and in particular, certain adhkar that in a moment of anger, if I recognize that there's a disturbance, internal disturbance, that dhikr would often help to alleviate that and lift it. And initially, a person doesn't feel much when they're reciting in a state of anger, but when they continue, alhamdulillah, that's just it's alleviated. particularly salawat on the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, or calling upon Allah by his beautiful name, Ya Sabur. This also helps. Any other reflections? This one was a little bit, more abstract as an assignment because we had to kind of choose what and how and where, and versus some of the other assignments, which are very, very measured out before the week starts. So, okay, inshallah, we will continue then onto this week's tafsir. Let me share the screen. So what we have here is we're going to look at the allegorical commentary first, the Ishara of Imam Ibn Ajiba, and then we will come to this week's verses. So Imam Ibn Ajiba, he comments let me just read the verses and then we'll go into his commentary. By those who rest violently, by those that draw out quickly, by those that glide serenely, by those that race to the fore, outstripping, and by those that govern affairs. On the day when the Quaker quakes and the successor follows upon it, hearts that day shall tremble, with eyes humbled. They will say, are we to be restored as we were before? What when we have become decayed bones? They say, this then would be a ruinous return. Yet it shall be but a single cry. Then behold, they will be upon a wide expanse. So he mentions that in terms of the allegory that we can benefit from, the souls, they wrestle violently in not observing other than Allah. As they drown, so essentially that this is referring to the struggle of the human soul to be in the remembrance of God, right? So the souls wrestle violently in not observing other than Allah as they drown in the ocean of his oneness. Okay. And so what is being described is the soul that's actually overwhelmed by the divine presence. They draw out quickly from worldly material attachment and following their desires, their hawa, with quickness and exertion. Right? When here the exertion and the quickness is the reference nashitati nashta, is that this soul that has been wrestled violently or overwhelmed in focusing on other than Allah, they can't because they're now drowning in the divine presence. They also, in so doing, they were drawn out quickly from all other material attachments, concerns, even the tendency to follow their lower desires. It says with quickness and exertion. So what's being described here is actually a soul that has gotten to a higher place, right? In terms of the nafs, this is a soul you could say that maybe have graduated out of a nafs al-lawama, maybe into either the inspired soul, a nafs al-mulhama, or the nafs al-mutma'inna is higher than that. So this is or there's a radiya and then there's mardiya and then there's mutma'inna. But the point is that anything above a nafs al-lawama is now in a realm that is you could say it's a higher level spiritual state for the one who is experiencing that or who has been gifted that by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By those that glide serenely, they glide with their thoughts in the ocean of the lights of the higher realms and the secrets of the highest realm. This is the thoughts of such people. Their fikra, right? Their contemplation, their spiritual contemplation glides serenely into these other realms that are being described. The sabiqati sabaqa are those that race to the fore outstripping, They outstrip others as they rush to the divine presence. Right? So the Sabiqun have been described many times in our class, and these people who just do exponentially better in terms of how they come to God. And the highest level, well, فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا, the highest level of closeness with God allows them to govern affairs in the world, right? And this is something he describes as maqam al-qutbaniyya, right? Al-mudabbirat, right? This is, they have the ability to govern certain things in this world. What does that mean? It means that it's very similar to the hadith that we've taken many times before, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves someone, he becomes the eyes with which they see, the ears with which they hear, the mouth with which they speak, the hand with which they strike. And if they were to ask Allah for anything, he would surely grant it to them. So they're given, I could say, more ability to govern the affairs of this world and to affect them in a positive way. Just 1 second. Now that's one approach to these first 5 verses. Another approach to these first 5 verses is that the souls wrestle violently from fortunes and desires, drowning instead in the worship of their Lord through various kinds of righteous acts. These souls are the worshippers, the ibad. Okay, so it's the first level is the ibad. They wrestle violently from other things and they go to the worship of God. And then the nashitat, they are those who pull out from worldly attachment and its people, fleeing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with full exertion. And these are the ascetics, the zuhad. And then those that glide through their intellects to the secrets of knowledge, and they extract from the Qur'an and Sunnah pearls and gemstones that is such that benefit flows from them until the day of judgment. These are the ulama, the scholars. And then those that outstrip others, they are racing to Allah with various kinds of struggles and wayfaring. So various kinds, right? They outstrip others, not in the exact same way, various kinds, right? And subhanAllah, I read this, and one of the things I had thought about was, you know, how it's not good necessarily for us to compare our paths with the paths of other people. Like we can be inspired by other people's paths, but we can't really compare our paths because everything is so unique. And there are particular good deeds or efforts or things that ways of worshiping God, acts of service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to his creation, that we would miss if we're just trying to do a carbon copy of someone else next to us, because Allah has specific purpose for us, and there may be a specific service that we have to do. And if we're looking to the right and to the left, we're going to miss the thing that's right in front of us that is our path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not about racing, it's not the same race course for each person. It's a very different race course. And so they race to the fore, outstripping their, in terms of, they're on their own path. They're looking at what God is sending them, and they are meeting every challenge and meeting every opportunity to worship him. And they're seeing these things for what they are. So they outstrip others, racing to Allah with various kinds of struggles and wayfaring through spiritual stations until they arrive at witnessing the divine, always and above and beyond everything else. These souls are the awliya and the arifin, the intimate friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the knowers of God. And then the highest levels, فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا, he mentions the highest levels are for the prophets and the greatest inheritors of the prophets. So in every time in the world, there will be hidden and known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a spiritual hierarchy. Okay? There are people who are better than us. There are people who are better than them. There are people who are better than those people. And the believers are arranged, our souls are arranged in a particular way. And at the very top of the hierarchy, right, is actually the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then in every era, there will always be someone who has inherited the most from him. Okay. So it's not just this idea of the inheritance of the Prophet Muhammad being outward knowledge. It's outward and inward. It's the knowledge and the practice. And this station of the one who has inherited the most from the Prophet Muhammad in any given time, the title that's often given to such to this person, and it's a title that's given to them as in, like we wouldn't say, oh, so and so is that person. We wouldn't say that, but we would say this station exists among mankind at all times. This station exists, right? This highest level of inheritance necessarily exists. Okay, and that is al-Qutb al-Ghawth. They're described as being like a pole, right? A pole is a hard thing to sort of wrap our minds around, but imagine that they are one end of a pole is on earth, right? And the other end of the pole is in the heavens, you could say, right? So they're kind of like this individual who has a higher connection, if you will, a deeper connection, a stronger connection, and yet their feet are on the ground. They're firmly established in this world. They're not an angel, and they're not passed away. It's not a soul that's passed away. It's a living human being. And then he spends some time in the allegorical commentary focusing on absaruha khashia, and the word actually a concept of the concept itself of khashia. Khashia is a fear which causes someone to be ashamed or embarrassed of doing the wrong thing. So here, khashia is different than khashia. Okay, so there's a ayn in khashia, but there's a ya in khashia. Well, we're going to talk about khashia for a little bit, because here, absaruha khashia is their eyes are humbled, right? Now, something for us to think about on a spiritual level, this is on the day of judgment, their eyes are humbled. So on a spiritual level, khashya is this fear which causes someone to be ashamed and embarrassed of doing the wrong thing. So ashamed in front of who? In front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is worthy of our best. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us khashya of Him and not others. Also, if we truly fear Him, you won't be afraid of anyone else other than Him. So it's in awe, but you could say there's a jalali aspect to it. There's a majestic aspect to it. It's an awe that makes it so that a person does not want to do other than what Allah wants them to do. And it's an awe that comes from knowing God, right? But not an awe that is just fear of punishment, for example. It's an awe from God's power. It's an awe from God's beautiful names and attributes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Fatir, in verse 28, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. That truly, the people who really have khashya of Allah, who have true fear of Allah, are the ulama. Ulama here is not just outward scholars, but what other scholars have said is that these are, like ilm means to know, and the ulama are the knowers, and these are the knowers of God. Al-ulama billah. Because again, if you do know Allah, then you would not disobey Him for the blinking of an eye. Whoever has this fear, they acquire every good, and they're protected from every evil. There's a narration, it's in the Sahih of Imam al-Tirmidhi, Man khashiya adlaja. sorry, من خشي أدلج, ومن أدلج بلغ المنزل. So the one who has awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they enter. And the one who enters has reached the home. The one who enters has reached the home. So the key to sort of like entering into a state of being in the divine presence is khashya, is having awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we did the assignment before of trying to have a sense of awe or haiba in our prayers, right? Entering the prayer with that state of awe and recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that nurtures the remembrance of God in our hearts and nurtures the prayer itself. It allows us to enter a state of worship. So khashya is a very important aspect. As one of our teachers mentioned, he talked about mahabba, about the love of God. And this is something Sheikh Fuad always mentions. It's a beautiful analogy for all of us. May Allah help us to benefit from it. That the roots, loving God is like a tree. And the roots of the tree are humility. Okay. The roots of the tree are humility. That would be the khashia, right? the humbleness. The trunk of the tree is knowledge, right? Knowledge of God. And you have to know the one that you're going to love. The branches of the tree are this awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this like consciousness and awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that would be the khashya, right? Then the leaves of this tree are a sense of shyness in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-haya, that we don't want to do anything in his presence that like he wouldn't like from us, that's not pleasing to him, that's not worthy of him, right? So the sense of shyness when it comes to how we are in his presence. And then the fruits of the tree are to do the acts of obedience, the acts of worship, do things that are pleasing to God and staying away from those actions that are prohibitions. And the water that irrigates this entire tree is dhikr, is the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so with the water of remembrance, humility, right? The water of remembrance reaches the roots of humility and then inspires us to know and learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that brings about greater awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that awe brings about a sense of shyness in front of him to do anything other than what he wants from us and to and then again the fruits being those acts themselves, those acts of worship that are pleasing to him. And a tree with many fruits, right, that is plentiful, has a wonderful harvest of fruits, is a tree that has been nourished well, right? It's been irrigated well with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is concludes the allegorical commentary for now. And we will move on to the verses for this week, inshallah. This week we're going to go from verses 15 until 26. Okay, inshallah, that's the intention. And we will not go over time. We will stay within our time limit. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هل أتاك حديث موسى إذ ناداه ربه بالوادي المقدس طوى اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقل هل لك إلى أن تزكى وأهديك إلى ربك فتخشى فأراه الآية الكبرى فكذب وعصى ثم أدبر يسعى فحشر فنادى فقال أنا ربكم الأعلى فأخذه الله نكال الآخرة والأولى إن في ذلك لعبرة لمن يخشى. And we'll stop there. Interestingly, the word khashya comes up twice in these verses. Has there reached you the story of Moses, when his Lord called out to him in the holy valley of Tuwa, go to Pharaoh, truly he has rebelled, and say, would you purify yourself? and let me guide you to your Lord, so you would fear him, have khashya of Allah. Then he showed him the greatest sign, but he denied and disobeyed, then turned his back, moving swiftly. Then he gathered and proclaimed and said, I am your Lord Most High. So God seized him with a punishment exemplary in the hereafter and in this world. Truly, in that is a lesson for whosoever fears, whoever has khashya. So for verse 15, one of the things that I'll mention here is this is, as was said in the first class in Surah Al-Nazi'at, that this surah is considered to be the first surah in which the story of Pharaoh and Musa alayhi salam is being mentioned in the chronological order of the revelation. Obviously, it's in the last juz of the Quran, but as we know, many surahs in the last juz of the Quran were from the first surahs that were revealed. So in terms of chronological order of revelation, this is considered by many of the Mufassirin to be the first time the story of Pharaoh and Moses is being mentioned. And so it's almost like an introduction to the beginning of the story is how we are viewing it this time. The question form that is used here, هل أتاك حديث موسى? Have you not heard the news, right, or the story of Musa alayhi salam? Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that this form of asking the question is not just to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, but it's to the people of Quraysh who actually do have some knowledge of the story, because there are some of the previous nations, some of the stories of the previous nations have reached them, at least in maybe not the details, but their realities. So it says this form of questioning is tashwiqan, right? It's to make a person interested in what comes next. If you're sitting with someone in conversation and say, did you hear what happened? If it's something now, everyone's like, what are you talking about? At first they want to listen, right? It causes a shauq, a desire, an interest in hearing what the next of the remainder of the story is. But then if it's about the past, it would be something like, did you guys ever hear about the story of so and so? Right? That's the way that this has been sort of the form of the question. هل أتاك? Did you guys ever hear the story before? Did the story of Musa alayhi salam reach you in the past? It's an old story. It's not something happening right now. Did this old story ever reach you all? So again, it makes a person want to listen to what's coming next. And it's to call our focus and interest to the story and its lessons. And again, the story of Musa alayhi salam and verses that deal with the story of Musa, the details of the story of Musa alayhi salam are mentioned in many places in the Quran. It's also said that Musa alayhi salam is mentioned over 25 times in the Quran. So, so this is definitely one of the stories that the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has to also continue to not just talk about it like the past, but there are lessons for us today. When a story is mentioned more than once, repeatedly, many times, and then that's not just so that we can look at some story from the past and say, wow, that was amazing. But no, there are lessons for all of us to take from specifically the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and the accounts that are shared with us in the Quran. Again, as I mentioned before, it assumes that there's basic knowledge of the story of Moses, of Musa alayhi salam amongst the Arabs, but the Quran comes and gives details. It's the aspects of the story that people did not know. It's offered here as an example for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also and his followers of what will eventually become of the unjust rulers, right? And the unjust rulers that happened, Pharaoh was an unjust ruler. There's a lesson for the believers at that time of look at how Allah dealt with the unjust ruler of the past. The Quraysh have unjust rulers today, and they will also be dealt with. So there's a warning, but also like the parallel in the stories is placed there for everyone to take lessons from. when his Lord called out to him in the valley of Tua. Tua is either a proper name for the valley said to lie just below Mount Sinai, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Musa alayhi salam, or it's a term that's derived from the verb tawa, laya, to roll up, meaning that the valley is wrapped in sanctity, is rolled up in sanctity, or that it is sanctified twice, right? And that's mentioned in the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi and Imam al-Tabari. اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go to Pharaoh, truly he has rebelled. Tagha is more than just rebelliousness. It is to exceed the bounds. It is to go beyond what is acceptable. It is to cross red lines, right? It's a transgression that is that has gravity to it. All right. It's not a small sin. It is, you have really, gone off the deep end. So we can say, for example, with the genocide that's happening right now against our brothers and sisters in Palestine, that the Israeli government has tagha, right? They have gone beyond the bounds. They have transgressed beyond any recognizable human or humane limit. It's exceeded the bounds. And here it's in two forms. It's exceeded the bounds internally, right? Because of not a kufr is one aspect of it. Ibn Ajiba mentions kufr as disbelief in Allah. But it's worse than kufr because Pharaoh claims that he's God. So it's not just a disbelief in God, but it's a fabrication of who God is and ascribing that to himself, right? Actually making the false claim that he's God. Not even that he's the son of God, not even that he's an associate with God. No, he is God himself. This is the lie, the great lie of Pharaoh. It's also said, and I've said it before in this class many times, it's a good line in poetry, that every oppressor has a God complex. They think that they run the world. They think that they can do whatever they want. If they don't think that they're God directly, delusionally, like Pharaoh did, they have a God complex. They think about themselves in that way, that they're just above everyone else and can do whatever they want without consequence. So internally, it's disbelief, right? But it's also the claim to be God. It's also asking other people to worship him in religion, right? So it's like it's transgression on a you could say on a level of beliefs and claims and fabrications and lies and slander. Then there's another level to it too, which is tughyan. And the tughyan is both rebelliousness against God and rebelliousness against Fir'aun after he comes to him and calls him to God. But there's tughyan in his oppression of mankind, right? The people around him that he oppresses and he harms, and he thinks that he has the right to do so. So he has transgressed the bounds. He has gone off the deep end on two levels. One, when it comes to what is true religion, right? Like he's gone off the deep end. And the other, how do you treat the creation of God? And with his oppression, he had gone off the deep end. فَقُلْ هَلْ لَكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَزَكَّىٰ. And say, would you purify yourself? I think this question is an amazing question. It's an amazing call. Musa alayhi salam is being sent to go to Fir'aun and invite him to repent, to turn back to God, to purify himself from the things that he had done terribly, terribly wrong, right? And even the question, would you purify yourself? Like, would you be open to this? Would you consider this? There's an opportunity to turn over a completely new leaf and put all of the oppression and the transgression and the lies and the everything to one side and simply just turn to God sincerely and to rid oneself of whatever they did in the past. So the first approach to Pharaoh is actually a genuine invitation. It's a genuine invitation to change. It's not a rebuke. He could have started with a rebuke and he would have been more than justified. It's not a condemning him automatically to fire and punishment. It's telling him about an opportunity to just change everything, change his ways. You know, it doesn't have to be this way. And in it, there's also a question of like Musa alayhi salam speaking first even to the heart of this evil tyrant. So it's like, do you have any desire? Najib is mentioning this. It's as if he's saying, do you have any desire to be cleansed from disbelief, rebelliousness towards God, harming others, by turning towards God in obedience and faith? It comes to him as a question, but it's also a command, because when the prophets fulfill the right of tabligh, which is to tell others about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's actually a command, but it's through invitation, because it's a gentler way to command people, is by asking them. It's kind of like when you think about when you tell your child, would you like to clean your room now, right? Or can you clean your room right now? You're saying it as a question, but in reality, it's a command. Or, can you please go make wudu before we get ready to pray? You're saying, can you do this? You're asking it as a question, can, but the intention of this can is actually would you, it's a command, but it's a command that's done in a gentle way. If you were to say, go make wudu, go clean your room, that's different than, can you please go clean your room? Or can you please go make wudu? So, but Imam Najib, he says that even though it comes as a question, in reality, it's a command from a prophet. And he's fulfilling the right. So he's also tarbiyah, that's part of the tarbiyah to ask in a kind way or in a gentle way. There's a double idgham, right? So here you have idhab ila fir'auna innahu tagha, right? فَقُلْ هَلْ لَكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَزَكَّىٰ. And so this is mentioned here. It's removed because you would say, if you put it's removed for ease, I want to say. So instead of saying فَقُلْ هَلْ لَكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَتَزَكَّىٰ, it just says فَقُلْ هَلْ لَكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَزَكَّىٰ. So the first ta is removed, but it has the same meaning. So I think the first reflection that I have is that this is the worst person to approach. Like, this is the greatest criminal on earth in his own time span. And that the first ask is done in a nice way. The first ask is done as a question. And it's part of, like, again, the tabiyah of the prophets to ask in a nice way first, to come first and try in this way. And it's, I think, also a lesson for us in terms of how we speak to one another. If this is how Pharaoh is being called, and he is Pharaoh, he's Fir'aun, and this is how Musa approaches him and is being told to approach him, then what about like us in community life as Muslims, as brothers and sisters? You know, if there's something that we want to give as a reminder to each other, or prevent someone from doing something that we think might be harmful to others or harmful to themselves, may Allah help us to address each other in a noble way, in a gentle way. And again, going back to the last assignment about anger, you can be angry about wrongs and still not take it out on the person who you actually want to help inspire them to change their behavior. So yelling at someone is not going to genuinely inspire their heart to change their behavior. They may change what they're doing because they're afraid of you, or because they want to, like they just want to stop you from behaving the way you're behaving, but that's not even the way that Pharaoh is addressed. So what about when we, again, in community life, how do we address one another? How do we address each other in person? We tend to be better, but how do we address each other online? There's so many terrible, I mean, we've talked about it before. The way that, in the comments of different like hot topics and issues, we often completely lose ourselves as a community when it comes to argumentation online. We have, keyboard warriors. They'll say anything behind a keyboard. If they come in person, they can't say anything. And it's, Pharaoh was addressed nicely. I think we can make efforts, inshallah, 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 may Allah help us all, especially in moments when we're angry, to reel that anger in, to make tasbih, to make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until our hearts are in a better place, and then to come to people and speak to them in a nice way, especially in community life. I mean, someone who is worthy of it, the worst place of hell in hellfire is being addressed with the question, هَلْ لَكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَزَكَّىٰ, right? And then وَأَهْدِيَكَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَتَخْشَىٰ. And the next line, so beautiful. And let me guide you to your Lord so you would fear him. Yes, this is a really nice comment. It seems that even Pharaoh was given the benefit of the doubt that maybe, just maybe, he feels some small remorse of his action, but doesn't know how to now mend his ways. So the thing is, what I think is fascinating about this is that the command for us when we deal with one another is to give each other as much as we can, especially on the first attempt in communication, the benefit of the doubt. And Allah knows that Pharaoh is not going to respond to the call. And Allah knows that Pharaoh will oppress even more believers. And Allah knows that Pharaoh is going to kill so many of the Muslims who are following Musa alayhi salam. And Allah knows that he's the worst oppressor on earth. And Allah knows that he will be drowned. And Allah knows that he will be drowned while he's trying to pursue Musa alayhi salam with all of his army and his soldiers. Allah knows all of this, and Allah knows that he's going to have the lowest level of hellfire. And yet the command of Allah to Musa alayhi salam is to treat him in this way. And it's our tarbiyah that we give each other the benefit of the doubt. If Pharaoh is supposed to be treated in this way, where he has to be given on a worldly level this opportunity to have a nice invitation back to the way of God, such that when he rejects it, then he has nothing to defend himself, right? And on the day of judgment, he can make no self-defense and say, I didn't know, or that the way that they presented it to me was like this or like that. No, the prophet came to you, you saw the miracles, he spoke to you kindly, he invited you in a beautiful way, and then after all of that, you still rejected. Not only rejected, you fought and you killed and you oppressed even more. So you can say that like there's an outward reality to the way that we're supposed to call people to God, regardless of their terrible crimes and backgrounds. And then there's an inward reality, which Allah knows already if they're going to respond to that or not. But for us, we should treat people with that benefit of the doubt, as in this hope that if I call them in this way that God has told me to call them, if there's any sincerity in them, inshallah, if I call them in a sincere way, it will reach that sincerity in their heart, and maybe they can actually change their ways. So this, I mean, it for us, it's also a sign to like have hope in people around us, have hope for Muslims living in a non-Muslim country, in our neighbors, in our communities, that if we address people in ways that like are coming from a genuine place, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, hearts that are sincere to God may be turned, and hearts that are not, we leave them to God. But this idea that we call people, and we call even with like terrible backgrounds, the first invitation is always you could say a gentle invitation. Just as the Prophet Muhammad SAW invited the Quraysh, the tribe of the Quraysh, to Islam in a peaceful manner, again, Musa salam is instructed to first invite Fir'aun to follow God's revelation. Right? Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Taha, فَقُولَا قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Right? And this is to both Moses and Harun, Musa and Harun, and Surah Taha. Yet speak unto him gently, that haply he may remember or have fear. Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says, it's like when a person says to, it's like when a person says to someone else, will you not come to our house? Right? Won't you come to our home? When you're saying that to a guest. So it's that kind of invitation, right? وَأَهْدِيَكَ إِلَى رَبِّكَ فَتَخْشَى. Won't you come this way? Won't you come to our home? Won't you come to this path? It's common in the Quranic themes that no community is punished for wrongdoings until it has been offered guidance. And not just, again, guidance not offered in a it's not considered offered in the first place unless it's offered right. Right. So it needs to be offered as an invitation. This is also mentioned in Surah Al-Qasas. And thy Lord never destroys towns until he sends a messenger to their mother city to recite unto them our signs. And also in Surah Al-Shu'ara, and never did we destroy a town save that it had warners, right? And these warners would come and warn people in a nice way, in a good way, so that they can't, it's not something that they can feel repulsed by. Rather, it's coming to them in such a good way that for them to turn away from it is an act of rebelling against something that they recognize to be true. Right? It's not something that is hidden from them after that. So having a knowledge of the right and wrong, of what is right and what is wrong, is important in terms of for things to count. Right. So a person who knows that something is right and they do it, it's counted as a good deed. The person who does not know, for example, that something is wrong, and they do it because they genuinely didn't know at all, right? If it's something that is, especially if it's not harmful to other human beings, a person is not held accountable for what they did not know. Right? If they did, a person, let's say, for example, there's a new convert to Islam, they became Muslim, and they don't know the details of the religion yet, and they go and they drink alcohol, but they're already Muslim, right? Are they, this is a discussion. Are they considered sinful, for the fact that they drink alcohol? If they genuinely did not know, and they're in a process of learning their religion, so it's not like they're trying to just be this Muslim who doesn't know anything. No, they just recently converted. They just didn't know, right? So a knowledge of right and wrong is important for consequence to occur, spiritual consequence to occur in Islam. Our knowledge counts either for us or against us. And, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us so that our knowledge always counts for us and not against us. The more that we know, the more that we are responsible for, the more that we're held accountable for. So knowledge is both this blessing, it's a light, but it's also, it's a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَأَرَاهُ الْآيَةَ الْكُبْرَى. Then he showed him the greatest sign. So one account mentions that there are 9 clear signs that were given to Pharaoh. It does not state which one was the greatest sign. Some said, and this is some of the Mufassirin, they said that it is when the staff of Musa alayhi salam, his walking stick, became a serpent, and it swallowed or killed that of the magicians that were Pharaoh's magicians. That was the greatest sign, because at that moment they knew very clearly that this is not magic. This is a miracle. Others, they mentioned that it's when the hand of Musa alayhi salam had turned white. Others still said it was the parting of the sea, because at the moment when Musa alayhi salam takes his staff and touches the Red Sea, and the sea splits into two sections, and his people are able to walk across with the water split in two ways, that is a clear miracle. Fir'aun could have not followed. Fir'aun could have literally seen the sea split in that way and said, God's on his side. Look at the miracle that he has. And he could have stayed on the shore and not followed him, having seen the greatest sign and recognized, this is beyond me. This is only the power of God, and I'm going to desist harming, his messenger. But he sees the greatest miracle, again, for those who consider the splitting of the sea to be the greatest miracle. And then he continues to pursue him to try to kill him. And then others said, Al-Ayat al-Kubra is not one of the miracles it's referred to as the greatest sign, but it's actually a reference to all of the miracles that Musa alayhi salam came with. And so it's all of those miracles that were performed. The Bible also talks about this. There's biblical versions of what these signs were. They talk about 10 plagues, right? That included a disease of the cattle, flies, hailstones that come down, boils on the skin, a darkness that covers the land. There's no light. And also the death of all the firstborns of the people of Pharaoh. So this is a biblical approach. It's not our tafsir, but it's in the Bible. In terms of this story of Moses is also said or told with this idea of clear signs coming to Pharaoh, clear miracles that show Pharaoh that he's doing the wrong thing. In the Quran, it says 9 clear signs. Right? And we indeed gave Musa alayhi salam 9 clear signs. And Pharaoh's response to these signs is that he says, I believe you're bewitched. Right? The same thing that was said about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, that he is a magician, or that he is someone has done magic to him. Right? This is also a claim that was used, or a slander that was against Musa alayhi salam. Now, according to the Quranic version, there are 9 things that we can gather, or you can say not Quranic version, according to tafsir. So the first is that there was a drought. So Musa alayhi salam, when he's warning Pharaoh, he's telling him different kinds of punishments are coming if you don't respond. So the first one, he warns him about a drought. There's also then a shortage of food and crops. That's the second. Then there's also a flood. That's the third. The fourth is locusts, right? Like grasshoppers everywhere, destroying everything. The fifth is lice. The sixth is frogs. The seventh is blood. And the eighth is the miracle that comes from his staff, which include what happens with the serpents and also the splitting of the sea with the single staff. And then the ninth is his hand. So that's mentioned in the books of Tafsir. The point is Pharaoh knew full well what he was doing. He had such clarity that Moses is coming to him from God, and these are miracles. And very, very similarly, the people who are doing oppression in the world in Israel, they know very, very well what they're doing is absolutely wrong. That this is murder. They're justifying it. A lot of them are not religious. They're not even doing it for spiritual or religious reasons, which they're trying to claim. A lot of them are atheists. Zionism was started by an atheist. The ideology that started the state of Israel came from an atheist, right? So they don't even believe in God. Just claims that are used so they can get away with whatever oppression they want to get away with and have the power that they want to have, right? So Pharaoh, فَكَذَّبَ وَعَصَى. but he denied and disobeyed. Now, what's interesting is Allah describes his denial. It could have just ended there. It could have just stopped at فَكَذَّبَ وَعَصَى. He denied and disobeyed, but it describes him physically, okay? It describes his manner of disobedience. He didn't just disbelieve in Moses. He doubled down and decided to fight him. He doubled down on a lie, on slander. He felt threatened. So that it's like describing him. ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ يَسْعَى. Then he turned his back, moving swiftly. فَحَشَرَ فَنَادَى. So he gathered, right? He gathered his people and he proclaimed, فَقَالَ أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. I am your Lord Most High. Even after Fir'aun's sorcerers acknowledged, right? We know from the Qur'an and Surah Taha that the sorcerers themselves fell down prostrate. They say the Shahada. They proclaim that they believe in the God of Musa alayhi salam. When they see the staff of Musa alayhi salam, destroy theirs, they realize he's not dealing with magic. He's not dealing with jinn. He's dealing with divine power and miracles, actual miracles. So even after Fir'aun sees his sorcerers acknowledge the superiority of Musa alayhi salam and recognize what he has as being a sign of God, Fir'aun continues to deny. And he just, again, considers the serpent, the staff turned serpent, and also the white hand as mere sorcery. This idea then turned his back moving swiftly. Some of the Mufassirin, they say that this verse indicates that Fir'aun turned and fled when he saw the greatest sign, or the staff turned serpent. That's mentioned in the tafsir of Imam al-Razi. So Imam ibn Ajibah, he says, and so that's one opinion. Imam ibn Ajibah, he says that Pharaoh turned his back on obedience to God and in rejecting his signs. There's one account that says that the serpent asks Musa alayhi salam, command me as you will. And then the serpent opens his mouth and has 80 fangs. And when Pharaoh sees these fangs, then he flees. That's one account that's mentioned in the Tafsir of Ibn Ajibah. Others say no, actually, it's that he turns his back moving swiftly, because once he realizes the power of the message of Musa alayhi salam, he decides that he's going to move quickly to devise a plan against him. Right? So this sense of being threatened, no, now I'm going to move quickly. I'm going to act against you right now. I'm going to figure out how to fight you, how to defeat you. That's also mentioned in this opinion about that. Thumma adbar yas'a is also in the tafsir of Imam al-Razi. Then he gathered and proclaimed. Most say this verse indicates that Fir'aun gathered all the people in his, community, or in his, around him in Egypt, to declare his sovereignty. Imam Ibn Ajibah, he says that it wasn't all his people, it was actually all his sorcerers. He tries to gather them and turn them, convince them not to follow Musa alayhi salam. And so he says, I am your Lord Most High, because he doesn't want them to believe. Others also relate that Fir'aun sent people to different cities to tell the people that Pharaoh is declaring that he is their Lord and that only he should be worshipped. So he's sending people out to essentially repeat a claim. It's a false claim of ascribing lordship to himself, but also they're like spies to make sure that everybody's under his control. So they want to make sure that people are not becoming Muslim, that outwardly no one declares belief, that outwardly no one says that they believe in Musa alayhi salam, that outwardly no one follows him. So when he gathers, right, he's gathering his people or his community to try to establish this rule that everyone has to acknowledge, or he's enforcing them upon them, which is saying that he is everyone's Lord. according to um, well, another thing that's mentioned in the tafsir is that he gathers his people to pursue Bani Israel, the believers of and followers of Musa alayhi salam. So to stop them from following him. So specifically that he's gathering against Bani Israel is also something that's mentioned. According to several reports, Fir'aun first said, "O notables, I know of no God for you other than myself. And then I am your Lord Most High." It's also mentioned in Surah Al-Qasas. So God seized him with a punishment exemplary. فأخذ الله فأخذه الله نكال الآخرة والأولى. It's exemplary in the hereafter and in this world. So it's the wording is also important here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that his punishment is exemplary. First, he mentions the hereafter and then this world. So he doesn't say this world and the hereafter, which is often how we speak. We always speak about dunya and akhirah, but the way that this is described, both worlds are described in this verse, is the akhirah first, then this world. Why? Because the punishment is going to be so clear for everyone. It's not a hidden punishment. What happens in al-akhirah, and it's going to be so much more grievous than any kind of punishment that could ever happen on this world. So it is a greater punishment. We know that him and his army, they're drowned, right? Allah drowns them all. But even drowning in the Red Sea, where the seas close upon him and his soldiers, is not an example that is greater than the example of the way that Pharaoh will be punished in the next life. His punishment in the next life will be an example in the next life for rebelliousness against God. The word nakal also indicates weakness and inability, evoking the sense that God rendered Fir'aun impotent in opposing Musa alayhi salam. Like he just, with all of his claims to power, all of his claims to divine ability, all of his soldiers, all of his sorcerers, all the resources that he had, in the end, he is weak. And he is weak and impotent and has nothing in the face of the punishment that will come to him, and that came to him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's different interpretations about the punishment of this world. Some said that the worldly punishment were the plagues that were sent upon his people, and their drowning in the sea. Others read this verse as the punishment of the last and the first, which means that the first indicates the punishment for saying, "I know of no God for you other than myself." So as a punishment to that statement. And the last for his saying, "I am your Lord Most High." So al-akhirah and al-ula is not referring to, and according to this opinion, dunya and akhirah, or akhirah and dunya. It's referring to the specific causes for the punishments. The first one being the statement that when Pharaoh says, "I know of no other God for you other than myself," and then the other statement being, "I am the Lord Most High." That's mentioned in the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi and Imam al-Tabari and others. The third is that the word "the first" is for denying Moses, and the last is for his saying, "I am the Lord Most High." So, yeah, so I think we can leave it at that. Truly, in that is a lesson for whosoever fears. The word again that's used here is yakhsha, liman or liman yakhsha. Whoever has awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can benefit from knowledge. Whoever has a recognition of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, they can benefit from the warning, they can benefit from guidance, they can benefit, and the way that fruit again comes out of their of their awe and of their fear of doing that which is displeasing to God. Whoever has that is going to have the fruit of obedience to God, of devotion to God, of turning to Him, not turning away from Him. Uh, I think this is, I mean, when it comes to people who can benefit from a reminder, right? إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى. There's a teacher who once said that when people don't want to hear something, if they don't want to hear guidance, if they're just not interested, you could give them 1,000 proofs for something. This is even a Muslim who doesn't want to believe in something that's established in religion, right? If a Muslim's just not interested, and there are Muslims who they've been, aspects of the religion have been slandered for them, right? So this, you could say the spiritual component of our religion, for many Muslims, it's been slandered. So they don't really want to believe in a spiritual path. They don't want to believe that it exists. They want to believe very minimally, and everything else they're just afraid of even looking at or hearing or listening to the evidences of. And, if you give them 1,000 evidences, it won't be enough for them because they're just not interested. They've already shut their mind down. They've closed their minds off. They've already made a decision about what they want to believe and what they don't want to believe. And nothing will actually, 1,000 proofs will not be enough for them. But for someone who has khashya, someone who has awe of Allah, and they're sincere to God, and they're like, I just want to do what God wants me to do. I just want to be who God wants me to be. I just want to be guided in the way that God would love for me to be guided. Knowing that, recognizing that they don't know everything, and recognizing that we can all continue to grow in guidance. There's no such thing as, I'm guided enough, I don't need any more guidance. When someone has this awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and this sincerity, and also this an awe that is like fear, I don't want to do the wrong thing. And so I'm open to learning, I'm open to growing. Then the lesson and the proof, one proof will be sufficient for them. One evidence will be sufficient for them. If they're sincere, they can hear the truth and recognize it. And it would spark something in their hearts, that there's something there. There's light there. I need to go in the direction of that light. And then they'll take the next step and the next step and the next step. And so, generally speaking, when people have already made a decision about what they want to believe, and they're not interested at all in anything, it doesn't matter how many evidences there are, they can't take it, they can't benefit from the lesson, they cannot benefit from the reminder. So it's إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى. There's a really interesting article about how to benefit from a bad khutbah. I think it's related a little bit. If a person goes into Salat al-Jumu'ah, and their intention is, this Salat al-Jumu'ah is a ritual prayer, it's a congregational gathering, and sometimes the khatib may not give a great khutbah. He just may not give something that's particularly inspiring. In fact, he may even give something that is a little bit off-putting, right? But if a person goes into the khutbah and their intention is, oh Allah, I want to benefit from at least one message today that I can apply to myself. I can take it in a good way. No matter how it's presented, I'll try to take the best lesson I can from it and benefit from it on this Jummah and carry it with me throughout the week. Right? Someone walks in with that sincerity and that sense of, again, awe in front of Allah. When I'm going to Jummah, and this is a ritual prayer, I want to take something for my soul, take something for my week in my relationship with Allah. They'll still be able to benefit, even if the khutbah is not that great. Even if 90% of the khutbah they cannot even apply. But they'll look at that 10% and take gold from it, because they came in with a heart that's aware of Allah and has awe for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they're looking for where they can take that lesson from. So again, this quality of having awe of Allah allows us to benefit from reminders, allows us to take lessons from things, allows us to benefit from those lessons. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to be that way, to be a people who can benefit from reminders, to be a people who pay attention to the reminders and lessons that Allah places around us at all times. And that is actually related to our assignment for this week, inshallah. It's outside of this class, not just this class, but outside of this class, to be a person who can take lessons from environments of learning or environments of reminders or from whatever environment that you're in. And as much as we can, to try to find the lesson. Um, and again, the core of that or the source of that ability to benefit is to cultivate in our hearts all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word yakhsha is often translated as fear. It's it's it applies, but it's not, again, it's not a fear that makes you run away from God. It's a fear that makes you run towards him. It's in awe for him. It's like I would be afraid of disobeying someone who's so great, but not in such a way, again, not in a way that would cause a person to hide from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, it's the kind of fear that causes a person to turn towards him even more. And so again, cultivating this khashya and sort of like the practice point for us this week is find lessons around you in the different gatherings you're in the different places that you're going about in your week, and try to benefit from lessons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is surrounding us with. And whatever I said that's beneficial is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever I said that's wrong and mistaken is from myself and shaitan. Inshallah, we're going to close with dua. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى واجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى. علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم. آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقي منا ولا محروما. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven. Not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. So one thing that I was going to just also add is that we don't have class next week. So we actually have a 2-week break. And in addition to this weekly assignment, I want to encourage everyone to try to memorize. So the first, we covered up until verse 26, right? We have about 14 days, I think, until we meet again. So if you memorized 2 verses a day for the next 14 days, then you will finish all the verses, inshallah, just at 2 verses a day. So try to memorize to the point that we're at, inshallah, which is to verse 26. And to the question that is khashya similar to yakhsha then? Yeah, khashya is the noun, yakhsha is the verb. So khashya is the noun and yakhsha is the verb. Oh, here's a beautiful reflection that we are told that all that came to pass upon the children of Bani Israel will happen to Muslims too. The Palestinians in Rafah, stuck between the sea and an army, seems uncannily like Pharaoh and Bani Israel. Now I wonder what could become the striking of the staff in our times. Yeah, subhanAllah. May Allah open for them their path and grant all of them security and safety and well-being, and destroy anyone who seeks to destroy them, and destroy the oppressors who seek to destroy them. If they will not be guided and assist, may they be destroyed like Pharaoh and his armies. Inshallah, I'll see you guys in 2